Solitaire Rose Radio, episode 77, interviewing All Elite Wrestling's Nyla Rose about her upcoming X-Men book. In comics, death is often seen as a revolving door, much like in soap operas. There was a time when, if a character died, they were dead for good. However, because of the ongoing nature of comic book universes, Spider-Man's been around for 60 years. X-Men have been around for 60 years. Superman's been around forever. Batman's been around forever. And since about 60 years ago, the stories have been a continuous soap opera. So there are times when a character is killed for dramatic purposes, and then one or two editorial changes later, the character is brought back by someone else who has figured out a way to have that character return, albeit through whatever storytelling device they want. One of the characters who stayed dead after dying was the X-Men's Thunderbird. In 1974, Roy Thomas put together what is known as, at the time, the New X-Men, because the X-Men had been canceled in the early 70s due to low sales. And he had the idea of an international superhero team that could be sold to the international markets that Marvel was in. So they gathered together a group of what were known as international superheroes. Storm was from Africa. Banshee was from Ireland. Wolverine was from Canada. Colossus was from Russia. And it was going to be one of Marvel's quarterly books. Soon after the first issue was done, the quarterly book idea was scuttled, and they decided to make it a regular-sized comic. So, what happened was, in the first issue, they introduced a bunch of characters. In the second issue of the giant-sized X-Men, they were going to have a dramatic death to show that any of these characters could die at any time. Everybody's in danger. It's a common storytelling trope, but one that hadn't been used in comics very often. And the character who was basically created to die was Thunderbird. He was a Native American character. He had super speed and super strength, and he had an abrasive personality. He was created to die. So they didn't put a lot of thought into his background. In the first issue that the X-Men moved to a regular-sized comic, issue 94, he was killed in the story's cliffhanger. And many people who picked up that issue was like, oh, they'll bring him back in the next issue. You know, we'll find out that he didn't really die. But nope, he died. And there were two reasons for that. One was because the stories were going to be quarterly, and they felt like there were too many characters in the book to develop them all out. And second, the shock value, to kind of get fans talking, to give that level of danger. Now, in the X-Men, people come back from the dead all the time. There's a joke that Jean Grey has been resurrected more often than I've had a pizza. But the latest story in the X-Men is that they now have this way on the island of Krakoa to bring any mutant back from the dead. No one had brought back Thunderbird until now. Thunderbird is returning in a comic coming out on May 4th. So if you go to your comic shop on Wednesday, May 4th, or if you're like me and you're going to go to the comic shop on the 7th, which is Free Comic Book Day, there will be a new issue. It's a giant-size issue of the X-Men featuring Thunderbird, written by professional wrestler and actress Nyla Rose, co-written with Steve Orlando. And I cover wrestling for PW Insider as well as doing this comic book podcast. And I thought to myself, wouldn't it be cool if I could talk to Nyla Rose about this one shot, about someone coming from outside the comic book creative world into our little nerdy world and working on a character that's basically a blank slate. All we know about Thunderbird is that he's an obnoxious jerk who hates authority and is Native American. And that was it. There was no other characterization put on him. And to draw back the curtain a little bit, because I work with PW Insider covering AEW, I asked them for the people I would need to set this up with. We went back and forth, and finally I was able to get an interview with Nyla Rose. And Nyla Rose is a fascinating, fascinating person. When you listen to this interview, all of the things that she has done over her life, she's got a resume longer than mine, and I've done a lot of stuff. We get into the comics, but we also get into her acting. We get into the wrestling. And it's an interesting conversation as to how people who are creative outside of comics, when they come into comics, what brings them in and how they're able to sort of bring that creativity into our world. And I really enjoyed this interview. Well, I have Nyla Rose with me, and just to go over all of the things you have done, any of these would be a podcast in and of itself. You are former AEW Women's Champion. First Native American Women's Champion on a national stage.
I don't sure.
Yeah.
What about Mickie James? No?
Mickie James doesn't bill herself as Native American.
Okay, fair enough.
You were, let's see here, you were in the first women's AEW match, I believe?
Yes.
The four-way?
I think that is correct, yeah.
You also are the first trans athlete who signed with a major company and the first trans athlete who has won a major championship.
Mm-hmm.
You are going to be writing an X-Men book.
Yeah.
Featuring a character who was killed in the second X-Men story back in 1974 and has not been used since.
Pretty bananas.
You're the first Native American to write a complete issue of a Native American character.
Wow.
Because last year they did a Marvel Visions with all Native American creators, but they were all short stories.
Mm.
And you were in a TV series where you played a massive nerd that I have not got to see. Any one of these things is an accomplishment. So when do you sleep?
That is a very good question. Usually in the wee hours of the morning, kind of depending on what project is going on at any given moment.
Oh, and I forgot you have a Twitch channel too.
I do have a Twitch channel.
Where you're playing Elden Ring like everybody else.
Yeah, like everybody else.
Isn't that like it takes about like 500 hours to finish?
Something crazy. I'm hearing some numbers from some people and, from some of my coworkers, and they're logging in. They're like, I've got 100 hours, I've got 200 hours. And I go, oh my God, what have I got myself into? But I'm pretty sure I've put thousands of hours into Skyrim. So
okay,
yeah.
Well, first let's talk comics. What was the first comic you ever read?
That is a very good question. I couldn't tell you. The first one that I remember reading is one of those kind of comics that you just kind of get, like it's not really like its own thing, but it was Back to the Future, and I'm pretty sure I got it from the dentist's office, so it probably was promoting like brushing teeth or something. like Doc and Marty went back to show somebody that all their teeth like rotted out of their head or something. Like I don't know, but like that's the first one that I remember for some reason. But I fell in love with the art in there, and my aunt was big into comics, and I can't really place any particular character that she really liked. I do recall she had one of the original prints of Watchmen that was going around, so I definitely remember that from my childhood.
I hope you didn't read it in your childhood, because it's a
No,
little
no.
much for a kid.
Yeah, a little much, especially now, looking back, like, good Lord. But I do remember, the smiley face and the big yellow cover. I remember that. But she's the one who kind of got me into things. And the first one that I remember collecting, like, that I really got into was The Death of Superman.
Okay.
Like, I definitely remember my aunt was going crazy about this, and it was like a big deal. I didn't really understand why, but she was all about it, and that got me all about it. And next thing you know, we're collecting all these issues of Superman.
Now, also, you said that you've said in previous interviews, your grandmother's the one who got you into wrestling.
That is correct. Grandma got me into wrestling 100%.
So, in your mind, are the wrestling and the comics connected?
In my mind, for sure. And that's just my personal approach. The way I look at wrestling is comics brought to life. You've got all these crazy characters that are larger than life. Your Penta Oscuros. I mean, he's like steps right off of the page of the comic book. Sting, in a way, very much fits in the world of comics. On some level, I firmly believe all wrestlers do.
Well, and if you ever want to kind of have fun with Sting, find those old WCW comics from the late 80s, because they're pretty terrible.
Yeah.
But they had photo covers, and he was on all the photo covers. Not Flair, not anybody. Nope, was Sting. Sting was the star. The X-Men is a really densely packed book.
Mm-hmm.
And they've gone through a huge change. What got you... How did Marvel contact you, or did you contact them?
Actually, my co-writer, and I don't like saying I feel like I'm his co-writer, Steve Orlando. He's a fan of wrestling, and when he saw me, at least legend has it, when he saw me at the Battle Royal and I had on my Mystique gear, he was like, oh yeah, I think she'd definitely be into this. And he presented me, hey, this is the opportunity that's on the table. I'd love to have your voice. I'd love to have you, pick your brain and have you be a part of this. And we just we had a little lunch, if you will, and kind of talked a little bit. And he was like, oh yeah, she's the right one. And the next thing you know, he pitched it to them. They greenlit it. And then he came to me and was like, hey, we would love to have you write this book. And I was like, oh my God, that's yes, 100 times yes.
Now, Thunderbird is a character that's two appearances.
Mm-hmm.
In the first appearance of the new X-Men, and then he's killed in the second. And I don't know if Steve went into it or not, but one of the reasons he was killed, well, there were two reasons. First is, we need to kill off somebody to show that anyone can die at any time.
Yes.
And the reason Thunderbird was chosen was because, well, he's an angry jerk. Wolverine's an angry jerk. We've got more invested in Wolverine. Thunderbird's going to die.
Yeah.
So when you come into this character, that's all we know.
Yeah, like right on the table. And that was my knowledge as well. That was the base of my knowledge was, grumpy, also Wolverine of sorts. But like, you make a great point. There was I don't want to say an oversaturation, but it was to set the stage for the comic, for the possibilities. He was very much a red shirt, so to speak. Looking back, I don't know that he was actually written to be fleshed out, and that was a decision. It was like, hey, this is our intent for this character from the get-go. It's that area. But even in those two appearances, people latched on to him. They loved him. We've seen him pop up from time to time in memories and what have you, trading cards, figures. So he's got a little bit of a following. People like those surly, gruff types.
So as a writer, you've got a blank canvas.
Mm-hmm.
What did you kind of decide to bring in to sort of flesh out this character who's at best an enigma?
Just kind of exploring some of those questions, kind of like looking at some of the common questions out there about him, his history, his past, his family. Where does he come from? Who is he? Well, all that's up in the air, and you really can go in any direction. So Steve and I sat down and kind of talked about, albeit very little, what do we know of Thunderbird? When dissecting a character, at least in acting, one technique that was taught to me by my acting coach, Roland Gomez, no longer with us, unfortunately, he always said, take a look at what people say to you, what people say about you, and what people say to others about you. And from those things, you can get a lot of subtext and a lot of meat off the bones that a lot of people might have glossed over. So that's kind of what our approach was here, was like, what has Wolverine said to Cyclops about Thunderbird, or, what has Professor maybe written in his journal, to try to get those little pieces. And then from there, it was just connecting the dots.
Now, the X-Men is a hugely connected book.
Mm-hmm.
And you're coming out of a story and probably have to fit in with all these other stories. How much did you work with editorial to make sure that all the pieces fit?
That was Steve's superpower. Okay. That was his mutant power. He was a lifesaver. He was my Yoda. He very much had all the answers there. There were times when I was like, oh, what about, can we do this, or should we go this way? And he'd be like, well, that kind of conflicts with this, and then we have to steer it in this direction. So you want to talk about knowledgeable? Steve Orlando has it all up here. Like, he was connected to Cerebro at all times. It was crazy.
Now, you've also got to have a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end, mm-hmm. in a format you've never done before. So tell me about the process for writing this, because as I looked over your resume, I didn't see any writing. Doesn't mean you're not a great writer. Just means nothing's out there that's been published yet. Right. So what's the process for that?
Again, back to my acting days, the script dissection. It's the universal formula, beginning, middle, end. That's what we need. We need a call to action. We need resolution. Makes a good story. We need some cliffhangers, something that we can hang our hat on and maybe come back to later, some teasers. So having all these ingredients that I'm familiar with, but yes, it's in a format that's completely foreign to me. For me, the writing process, and I don't know that any other comic writers do this, I approached it very much like dissecting a script, kind of in reverse. Like, how would I, if I had this character, if I was to portray Thunderbird, how would I dissect him and get into his head and know who that is? I just reverse engineered that, and I'm in my living room acting out both parts. I'm like, we need to get him from point A to point B. And I'm genuinely playing both parts. Like, if I say this, how would this kind of character react to that? Well, I'd say this, and I'm writing it down, knowing it, may be completely wrong, but the idea there, the drive there is to just get it all on paper. We can get rid of the expletives, we can polish it up, we can clean it up, make it kid friendly later, but just get all those ideas on paper. So between me and my dog Venom, who was very helpful, we got some stuff down, and Steve and I seemed to have this crazy connection, because when I went to him with my version of the script, there was so much that was right on par with what he was doing, kind of in the same space. The verbiage may have been differently or slightly out of order, but our drive, our ideas were right in sync, and it was just melding the two ideas together. And what if we don't use this, but we do use this idea? What if we find a middle ground for these ideas? It was we just gelled. It probably was a much easier process than other people have had, because we were just on the same page from start through the middle to the end.
I do want to point out something. You talked about you acting it out.
Yeah.
If you read stuff about how Stan Lee was when he worked at Marvel in the 60s, when an artist would come in, he would act out the script for them, to the point where the artist Gene Colan used to draw Stan doing that to make fun of it and put it in the back part of annuals and stuff.
Yeah.
Because he would come in, Stan would be, grabbing a T-square and leaping across desks and stuff to act out the story. So you're in good company.
Oh, that was very much me. I had my phone in one hand with the voice memo open, and I'm like grabbing this invisible person, and I'm like threatening the air, and my dog is just looking at me. I'm like, just go with it, man. Just go with it. Yes, and first lesson of improv.
Yeah. What was it like when you first started getting those pages of stuff that you'd written, now drawn on a page with lettering and everything?
It's wild. It's absolutely wild. I love to draw. It's one of my passions. I love to draw. I'm not a very good artist though. So a lot of my stuff looks like, 4-year-old did it. And I have no shame in admitting that. I know my strengths, I know my weaknesses. My strengths, throwing people over the top rope, winning championships. Weaknesses, drawing a character on paper. That's okay. That's my wheelhouse. I'm okay with that. But I love to do it and I'm never going to stop. It's just a way to express yourself, right? So to see things that I had in my head, to see these visions illustrated exactly how I envisioned them is just absolutely crazy. And it feels good to know that I expressed myself in such a way that an artist could take those words and kind of go, yeah, nope, you painted a great picture. I see it. Here it is. And then bring those to life. It's crazy.
One of the nightmares that a lot of comic writers have is they will deliver their script and the pages they get back are like, I didn't write that. It sounds like that you were able to avoid that. As you're doing this, you talked about how you're taking stuff in and putting stuff out. Do you feel that you've created a springboard for Thunderbird to kind of become more than a footnote and a character that people, oh yeah, I kind of remember there was something about him?
I 100% do. I think we set Thunderbird up for an amazing run. Hopefully he's here to stay. We can create another character and bump him off. But I think I think people want to see Thunderbird. The excitement from the fans is already palpable. We've got fan art out there, and the book's not even out yet, and people are already creating fan art. So they want Thunderbird around, and I personally believe that we created this great story, as you said, a springboard. We kind of addressed some things, we hinted at some things, and we set him up. And hopefully we'll get to see these stories play out and new ones emerge.
One other thing, your comic is coming out on May 4th.
Yeah.
Not just Star Wars Day, but the Wednesday before Free Comic Book Day.
And the Wednesday that Dynamite's in Baltimore. Just gonna plug that real
Don't
quick.
worry. We're gonna be getting to wrestling too. But here's this book that's coming out 4 days before comic shops are going to be full.
Yeah.
Because Free Comic Book Day is insane.
Yes. It is.
Did you write this so somebody who's never read a comic before can pick it up and read it?
Yes. And it wasn't so much that somebody who's never picked up a comic before. We definitely were hyper aware that while people may be familiar with who Thunderbird is, they may have heard the name, not a lot is known about him. So we definitely wanted to kind of make it user friendly, so to speak. We wanted anybody to be able to pick this up and latch on to something about it and just say, hey, this looks like it's going to be cool. I don't know who this Thunderbird guy is, but I'm going to run to Google now. We definitely wanted that reaction from people who may not have had that relationship with Thunderbird or even the X-Men. But we also wanted to do the fans that are already there justice. We wanted to make them proud of their fandom. So, and I think we did a really good job of melding the two.
One other thing about this is you're doing an X-Men book.
Yes.
So the sales are going to be kind of up here.
That's
one of your coworkers, CM Punk, did Drax the Destroyer. His sales are kind of here. Are you lording it over him?
Not yet. Not yet. No, I don't want to shoot myself in the foot. And I want to shoot myself in the foot because he might make me go to sleep. But
have you talked to him about writing comics? Because he wrote 12 issues of Drax for Marvel, and every time I get to see him, I bug him about writing more comics, and he glares at me, which is what he does.
I haven't yet. He, albeit very charming, very polite, he intimidates me, and he always seems so busy, and I'm like, you know what, I'll catch you later. You look like you're into something. How's Larry doing? He's good, great, good to see you. Good talking to you, Mr. Punk, sir. Like he just always looks like he's in the zone. He's up to something, and so I know he's got his goals being back in pro wrestling, and I don't want to his time is valuable, and I don't want to take it up. But hopefully, I get the chance to chat with him a little bit.
Now, with this being your first book, anytime you do your first thing, you want to do more. Has Marvel said that there's more options? Are you pitching anything? And also, are there other companies you'd want to write for?
So not yet. You know, this at the end of the day, this is all a business, and I'm sure they want to see the numbers. And I can't fault them for that. But I do hope the numbers are fantastic. I hope they're through the roof. And I do hope they ask me back. I would absolutely love to do more. It was kind of like ironically, revolving around ink when I got my first tattoo. As I'm in the chair, I'm okay, where's the next one gonna go? Like, what's the next one gonna be? And that was like this one, you know. We're getting back those pages. I'm seeing the art come to life, and I'm like, this is pretty cool. When's the next one? Like, let's do it. Let's get there. I can't say for certain, you know, if there's any other companies I want to write for. I'm not opposed to exploring any opportunities that come at me, whatever they may be, and if it's going to be beneficial. There's hundreds of characters out there that I absolutely love and adore. So it's really just going to be a matter of hopefully more, more opportunities come my way and kind of seeing which ones fit.
Now, how was Marvel editorial with you being a new person? Did they hold your hand, or was Steve the one kind of holding your hand and walking you through the process?
Everybody on the team was phenomenal, you know, and I don't know the etiquette here. I'm new to this world, you know, in professional wrestling. We approach things a certain way. So I don't know who I'm supposed to name and who I'm not, but I want to give praise to our entire team, at this moment, our nameless team. I'm not trying to get in trouble. I'm not trying to get fired on my first day, but our entire editorial team was absolutely phenomenal, and they were super friendly, super kind to me, and really, really helpful in helping me through the process for sure.
And the X-Men team is a really good team because their stuff is so interconnected.
Mm-hmm.
They really have to kind of be firing on all cylinders because every book ties into every other book.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's any communication problems, the fans are going to jump all over it.
Oh yeah, you know, one of the few fandoms, you have to be really careful in producing their product, because one typo or one miscalculation throws the whole universe off, and especially nowadays with social media, they're not going to let you forget it.
Well, that's something I wanted to bring up because I've watched every episode of Dynamite. There have been a couple episodes where people had signs that weren't very flattering. And I wanted to just point out that you handled it with such grace, but also the company stood behind you. And I know one of the guys was kicked out and told never to come to an AEW event again. What does it feel like to have your back that strongly?
You know, it's not even just for myself. It's kind of like protecting our fans as well. We have a huge fan base that covers every spectrum of the galaxy. So I hope the fans didn't see it as them just having my back, but having their back as well, knowing that we're trying to create an environment where anyone and everyone is welcome. We said it from day one, pro wrestling is for everyone. We mean it. We want everyone to come to the show and have a good time. And, you know, signs in wrestling and, you know, jeering for the bad guys is very much a part of pro wrestling, but there is a definitive line.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't cross it. You can't, because then you're just being hostile and creating a not so friendly space. You know, at the end of the day, we're all there for entertainment purposes. Some of us are there to provide the entertainment. Some of us are there to enjoy the entertainment. But when you cross a line and make things hostile, people are going to get uncomfortable. And that is not what we're trying to do. So it makes me immensely proud to be a part of a major company that not only has their employees' backs, but genuinely looks out for their customers, their fan base, their patrons. I'm very proud of that.
Another thing that AEW does that I think is something to be proud of is they don't resort to stereotypes.
Mm-hmm.
And you, with all of the different parts of your background, could have easily been put as a character who's a stereotype, but instead you're a very specific type of character. You're that badass monster who comes in and tosses people over the top rope.
My wheelhouse, yes.
When you came in, did they talk to you about here's how we want to portray you? Or was it something where over time they kind of said, here's the stories we're going to tell, here's what you're going to be doing going forward?
In a sense, it was sort of kind of the first one. It wasn't so much, this is the kind of character we want you to be. It was more like, what kind of character do you want to be?
Okay.
And, you know, once we kind of bounced those ideas, then it was really like, how do we get you to be the best version of that? So that's where all of our coaches and producers come into play, just helping us be the best version of ourselves that we want to be. That is all of my backgrounds, all of my intersectionalities are a part of who I am, but they're not all of who I am.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, yes, it's important to have that representation to do those communities that I'm a part of proud, but there's so much more to me than just those things. So it's important to me to have a character that's more than just those things.
And also, you're always toward the upper part of the card. You're kind of like who the baby face has to struggle against in order to show that they're a hero. As you go into your the next section of the storytelling and everything, who are some of your dream opponents? At
this stage of the game, the first answer is an always evolving answer because it's going to be whoever has the championship. Those championships, I've said it countless times, it's not the only important thing in pro wrestling, but it is the most important thing in pro wrestling. So whoever has a championship is always going to be at the top of my list. Sorry, that's just how it is. So that answer is ever evolving. However, after that, Sheeta and I think, have mutual respect and understanding. Some call it chemistry. And I always have a fantastic time in there with her. So to revisit that at any time, I'm always on board for that. Serena Deeb, a living legend at this point, and that term gets thrown around very, very loosely, but I really believe in this case, she is one of them. If I get the opportunity to get in there with her, I have no doubt in my mind we're going to create something special. And then just a lot of the new people coming through and coming up. Pretty cool to be in a position to kind of be looked at as the person to help those people along.
Now, you've been in the business for a little while, but AEW has only been around for about 2.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So what was it like when you were out on the indies? Were you someone who lived in the car and did that, or did you have a certain area that you stayed in and sort of built up a reputation in that area?
A little from column A, a little from column B. Definitely up and down the East Coast, everywhere from Maine through Jersey, Maryland, Georgia, Florida, like literally the entire Eastern Seaboard. Anywhere my car would get to, basically. There were countless nights of sleeping in the car, not enough money for a hotel room. So you pull into a hotel parking lot, or, maybe you pull into a car dealership and, and knock back and go to sleep. I don't know if that's a good tip or not, but that's how you survive on the road. That's what I did. Making a name for yourself, pretty much for me, not just in one area, but anywhere that would have me. Getting the opportunities, getting recognition, being taken over to Japan, using that as a springboard to further my career, that when I came back to the States, more opportunities were opening up and I could get myself out a little further west, because now my name has a little bit of gravity behind it.
First off, I want to say that your match at Battle of the Belts 2 was fantastic.
Thank you.
And they had you in the main event.
Yes, thank you.
Do you feel that extra pressure when you're the main event on a show?
Oh, absolutely. There's, for me, at least, there's pressure always, because I want to go out there and I want people to have a good time. Whatever that means for them, I want them to have that good time. If that means booing me till they are hoarse the next day, if that means they want to cheer me, till they pass out. Whatever that means for them to have a good time, that's what I want to give them. Main event, you're on at the end of the night. They've seen quite a bit by that point. So there's that pressure to create something different and dynamic that they've seen the entire evening. But then also, you're probably going to be one of the lasting memories in their head. So you definitely want to give them their money's worth. You want to, and no matter where you are in the card, you want to give them their money's worth, but especially being in that main event position. This is kind of like, with the company is hanging their hat on. I want to do my company proud. They have my back. I want to show them that I have theirs.
Last night, now, if you want to go longer, I could go all night.
I can't go that much longer. We can go a little bit longer, but I can't go that much longer.
Okay.
I have a bed to put together.
Oh, well, have fun with that. Hopefully it's IKEA, so you only need the one tool. They've announced an AEW New Japan crossover. I imagine this will not be the only one. Who is it in New Japan that you just cannot wait to get your hands on?
So that's kind of the thing. Unfortunately, New Japan themselves do not have a women's division. However, they do work very closely with Stardom.
Yep.
So I have not really had the experience, the pleasure to work with anyone in Stardom. So for me, that forbidden door is wide open. I would call it a forbidden archway. I would welcome anyone to walk through that. Just to say that I've done that, check that box off, make your intro that much longer the next time I come back.
Now, I want to talk a little about the TV show you did.
Yes.
I have not seen it, but I read up on it. You played a nerdy IT head in a Canadian, was it a comedy?
Yes, it was a Canadian sitcom.
How did you go from a monster wrestler who's basically always the destroyer? Matter of fact, I believe that was one of your wrestling names.
That was.
Right? Yeah.
That was.
To the nerd who's working on the connectors in the network in Canada.
To quote a comedy legend, one of my favorites, acting. The great John Lovitz. It's called range. I grew up on sitcoms. One of my favorite, most fondest memories of my mother would be watching TGIF in the mid to late 90s. Like, oh, good. What was it? Step by Step, Family Matters, Perfect Strangers, like all of those things. The Friday night lineup, TGIF. And countless others. Full House is a sitcom staple, but just kind of channeling that. It's a very stylized, almost over the top, but not quite. It's very, very stylized, but trying to channel those TV shows that I grew up watching, that I was very fond of. Trying to bring that to this character and the delivery, it was a challenge. It absolutely was a challenge, but I welcome challenges. That's when I started studying music, I picked the hardest instrument, one of the hardest instruments. When I chose a profession, I chose one of the hardest ones out there. So I'm clearly no stranger to challenge, and this was another one, especially being in a different country with a ton of people. A bunch of strangers that quickly became friends and, dare I say, family.
And were you still wrestling while you were doing the show?
I was.
And how did your coworkers at the show, because to somebody like me, I understand that the skills are like this, but in acting, especially 10 years ago, they were not exactly looking at wrestlers and saying, oh yeah, that's acting. So how did they react to that?
They were a little taken back, a little shocked by it. And one of our crew members, and I feel awful, forgive me, I forget his name, very handsome guy. He dabbled in pro wrestling. So him and I, instant connection. We would talk about wrestling on set all the time. We found out that there was a wrestling show taking place at one of our locations for one of our episodes. Episode 4, I believe, was the Doomball episode. So him and I made plans. We're like, let's go check this wrestling show out. And him and I had the best time ever. We talked to some of the people, and I made some connections up there to like get brought in, and it was a whole thing. But it was a fantastic time. A lot of the stunts on the show, especially, namely that Doomball episode, I think that's when it really clicked for people. Because I was doing my own stunts. I was doing things probably the totally wrong way, but very much the wrestler way. So I'm like, no, take the mat out of the shot. Trust me, it's going to be great. I can probably do this 3 times, so make sure the camera's rolling, but like do it without the mat. It's going to look fantastic. And, you know, people are like cringing and stuff. And I'm like getting up like, oh yeah, that's great. Let's do it. Let's do another one. Let's take another tape.
Pitch your wrestling to comic fans. Pitch your comic to wrestling fans.
Oh man.
Because we need to get all these people buying your comic, and we need to get all these comic fans to watch your wrestling.
I said I put my foot in my mouth. I said I like a challenge, and you definitely brought the challenge. But check it out. If you want to see some hard-hitting action, some rock star, like a good old-fashioned rock concert, loud explosions, fire, pyro, larger-than-life people, flashy costumes, check out AEW Dynamite, AEW Rampage. Dynamite Wednesday nights on TBS, Rampage Friday nights on TNT. I guarantee you're going to have a good time. You've got acts like Penta Oscuro, the Lucha Brothers, the Young Bucks, myself, Nyla Rose, the Native Beast. You've got Top Flight, this kid, Dante Martin, unbelievable. I genuinely believe he has...
Local boy. I saw him down at First Avenue in Minneapolis for months.
You want to talk about comics and wrestling? This kid has superpowers. You cannot convince me otherwise. He doesn't even know what gravity is. I'm not sure he's ever stepped foot on this earth. But I guarantee it's going to have a good time. Now, for my comics fans, we got a comic book coming out. Thunderbird. You love him. You like him. You miss him. We wrote a comic book, myself, Steve Orlando, David Cutler. We've redesigned this guy, Thunderbird. So he's no longer look like he's stuck in the 70s. Come on, check it out. The book comes out May 5th, just before Free Comic Book Day. You're going to have a great time.
You can get it at comic shops. You can download it from Amazon.
Hey.
And if you buy it on Amazon right now, it'll download to your tablet or whatever other device you have the day it comes out. Well, Nyla, I want to thank you so much. I would love to talk to you again when we have a lot more time. We didn't even get into half the nerdy stuff we could get into. And that was Nyla Rose. I want to thank Nyla and the people at AEW for allowing me to set that up. Also want to thank you for listening. Now, this is also going up on PW Insider Elite. So those of you on PW Insider who haven't read an issue of the X-Men or don't know about comics, you can go to freecomicbookday.com or type that into your fire-breathing Google machine, and they will let you know what comic shop near you is offering free comic books. There are special comics that are put out for Free Comic Book Day that are kind of an introduction. Like there's a new Spider-Man giveaway comic that introduces the character and introduces the stories they're going to be doing this year. Same with over at DC. Same for the minor publishers. But also go down, pick up that new issue of the X-Men that Nyla Rose has written featuring Thunderbird. I'm really excited about it because, again, Thunderbird is a blank slate. They can do anything with this character and it won't contradict any continuity. I hope I get another chance to talk to Nyla Rose after I've read the comic and seen more of her in-ring work. I think she's one of the most interesting characters in AEW because of that ability to just be the monster, the roadblock for the good guys to overcome to show that they're worth moving on. Because this is a podcast and I need to make a little money, we do have ads, and the company that I have ads from is one that I heartily endorse, and that's NordVPN. Our newest sponsor is NordVPN. Let's be honest, if you're out on the internet, you need a VPN to protect you. There's all sorts of things going on the internet where people can track you. You could accidentally download a keylogger, all sorts of things. NordVPN gives the best security possible. It has a password manager which generates complex passwords, syncs across all your devices, stores your notes and credit card information. It also gives you 10 gigabytes of private cloud storage, secure files that backs up your data automatically. But the main thing it gives you is peace of mind. It gives you peace of mind when you're out on the internet, when you're streaming, when you're playing games, when you're listening to podcasts like this one. It gives you safety anywhere at any time. It protects your online activity. You get full access to all content. And if you use the link go.nordvpn.net sh3ku, it'll take you to where you can get a great deal for a 1-month plan, a 2-year plan, a 1-year plan. They are our newest sponsor. We're happy to have them. And if you would like to sponsor something here at any of the podcasts on the Solitaire Rose Network, you can. Just email me, solitairerosenetwork@gmail.com. Thanks. I also do a ton of other podcasts, and I talk about them here. The Solitaire Rose Radio Network is currently on a pause, basically because COVID-19 has made it so that I have to work a lot of extra hours at both jobs. But you can still go and listen to my other podcasts. Now, you're probably listening to Crazy Comics and Stories, which is the main podcast. But on this same feed, KRAYZCOMIX, is Solitaire Rose Radio, the solo radio podcasts that I do. I've done interviews, I've done short stories, I've done all sorts of things, and you can get to it right here on this same feed. I also do a podcast called Novelcast, where I take the novels I've written and turn them into free audiobooks. That's over at novels.solitairerose.com. Dangerous Dan Moore and I, and of course Wolfie B. Bad, give you bad advice over at badadvice.solitairerose.com. You send in your questions, and we give you the aforementioned bad advice. And then myself and Adam Vermillion from For the Love of Comics do the Fantastic Forecast at fantasticforecast.solitairerose.com, where we go through the issues of the Fantastic Four, 4 issues at a time, to give the plot and commentary on each issue. That's not all. Yes, I'm crazy. I still, over at pwinsiderelite.com, every week on Wednesday, do a recap of the latest episode of AEW Dynamite. I write up what happened, and then myself and Anthony Pyrus will do an audio. Now, you can only listen to the audio if you're a member at pwinsiderelite.com, and if you're a wrestling fan, you should be, where we then break down the episode, talk about what we liked, what we didn't like, give it a grade, and let you know if you should have watched that episode. Those are the other podcasts here at the Solitaire Rose Radio Network. Thanks. I want to thank everybody for listening. If you're listening to this on pwinsiderelite.com, I want to thank you for subscribing, and I will be back with another solo podcast soon where we talk to people or I tell more stories.